My name is Hamid Hakimi. I am the coordinator of Opportunity and Crisis Project at Chatham House, which is aimed at bringing experts and policymakers on some of the issues and challenges facing Afghanistan in 2014 and beyond. Today I am with Dr. Anna Larson. You are the co-author of Derailing Democracy in Afghanistan, which is a newly published book. You're also an associate fellow of the University of York, and you have also worked in Afghanistan for several years. Welcome to Chatham House. How significant are the upcoming elections in Afghanistan, in your opinion?
I think they're significant because they provide a way in which Afghans can renegotiate some of the economic and political resources that are existing in Afghanistan at the moment. And that renegotiation is a political and economic process. It's not just an event that is for 1 or 2 days to select a new leader. So it's more about the process and the political and economic renegotiation of power and influence than it is about selecting a leader per se. I also think that the elections at the local level, the provincial council elections, which are happening at the same time, are highly significant to a lot of communities across Afghanistan who are mobilizing around these elections. They're preparing, they are interested in having a candidate who is familiar to a particular local community, because it provides a good connection into central resources for them. So that's again an issue of political and economic renegotiation that's important at the local level as well. So I do think these elections are very significant, but in a broader sense than just selecting a new leader for the country.
We hear a lot about how the election campaigning and the entire election business, if I could use the term, is focused in the cities and in that context in bigger cities. In your research and work in Afghanistan, how do you assess the gap between the rural versus the urban population and how they are engaged in the process of elections?
From some of the rural communities that I visited in Afghanistan, it's quite clear that there are very rational decisions being made about which candidate to support. Oftentimes they're community decisions, they're consensus decisions by people coming together and deciding as a community who to vote for. But that doesn't mean that they're illegitimate decisions, it just means that they're collectively made. And oftentimes, as I've said, for very rational, very strategic reasons. And oftentimes rural communities are successful because they mobilise together. They're able to form a bloc that's big enough to have a successful candidate to get through the elections and win, and therefore they have that connection into central resources. So I think there's a huge divide between the way in which elections play out in urban and rural societies, but also there are differences within different rural communities, of course, and different urban settings as well.
And what should be done to ensure that these elections deliver a result that is seen as legitimate, at least by the Afghans and by broader international audiences, including the neighbours and the regional governments?
I think it's about broader questions of security and inclusiveness. It's about ensuring that as many people as possible in Afghanistan have access to polling stations as possible. And of course it's extremely difficult in insecure environments, but I think we need to put as much effort as possible into securing as many areas as possible for elections to take place. That sounds an obvious suggestion, but it's really critical. I think also that a lot of attention needs to be paid to processes of counting at the centre. In the 2009 elections, a lot of the fraud was passed off as having occurred in the rural areas where security was so bad that we couldn't send monitors and it was impossible to watch over the elections well. However, a lot of the problems that Afghans were talking about at the time were not those of ballot stuffing in the sort of back of beyond, right in the countryside, they were problems of the differences between the vote at the polling centre and the results that came out of the IEC in Kabul, which were significantly different in a lot of cases. And that gap was never explained to people. So there was a lot of frustration over that gap. And I think this time we need to learn from that and say, okay, let's make the process clearer. Let's ensure that if there is a gap in terms of time or in terms of the actual numbers between what's counted at the local polling station and what comes out as the final result, then we need to explain to people where that gap comes from and why it exists. And we need to pay more attention to the central level counting process and acknowledge that fraud may well be occurring there too, not just in the rural areas. So these aspects of process are important, as well as the longer term prospects for the future and the actual outcome of elections. So it's a mixture. The outcome is important, but aspects of the process are important as well.
Thank you very much.
Okay.